That's right, Angie. Actually, I've been to the Bake Off in LA. It's great in terms of meeting people, but yeah, you can only see clips from the film. There's a brief introduction by whoever is presenting for that film, and then that's it. So we thought we'd just run through, given it's award season, it's a great opportunity to highlight the work of the artists involved. We'll run through the 10 films going to be shown at the Bake Off, but we can bend the rules a bit. We can show you sort of making of and highlight what we think are some of the best aspects of each of the 10 films that are on show. And let's start with Gravity. Tim Weber headed up this incredible visual effects masterpiece. I mean, primarily the work was done at Framestore with help from Rising Sun and Prime Focus. I think their primary achievement was producing such amazing photorealistic effects, oftentimes using, of course, the actors' real faces, but everything else digital. And this involved this innovative LED lighting box that they set up, as well as cameras that were robotically controlled by the guys at Bot and Dolly, who are now owned by Google. And of course, the team shot the actors in these rigs that could move the actors around relative to the boxes, and the cameras could move in. It was all rendered in Arnold. I think the team should be particularly praised for how long some of these shots are, because in addition to the sort of the technical rendering side of it, just pulling off the choreography of the shots was incredible. In fact, the entire film of Gravity only has 156 individual edits in it, which is amazing. Best shot for us was the debris shot that starts the whole thing rolling at the beginning when Dr. Stone gets spun out of control. Just brilliant work.
I can't see you anymore. Do it now. Houston, I've lost visual, Dr. Stone.
ILM features very prominently in this year's award season roundup. Pacific Rim, I guess, heads that out. John Knoll headed up the team at ILM, which was also helped out by guys over at Ghost Effects, Base, Rodeo, Murata, Hybrid, and also I think they used some practical stuff that was provided by Legacy and 3210.
The battle scenes that we tackled are all quite complex in terms of just the recipe that is required to make a shot.
And this is, for me, a major animation film. Like, yes, there were some very large, very impressive water sims, and of course a lot of destruction, but the art shown by the animators in moving the Jaegers in such a way as to make them still seem incredibly big, but also move them fast enough to make action sequences was particularly clever. If you move them too fast, you lose the scale. If you move them too slow, you lose the audience. So I think it was outstanding work. Actually, it was also outstanding use of an ocean-going tanker as a baseball bat. I think ILM used primarily Arnold, though also used V-Ray. Joe Letteri and the Weta Digital team have built an incredibly well-earned reputation for doing outstanding character work. But their animation of Smaug in The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, is got to be a masterclass in character animation. Smaug is one of the most exceptionally crafted and executed characters we've seen on the screen, full stop. It's just a masterclass in animation. The lighting, the texturing, it all comes together really, really well.
Well, we find that every time we have to do a large character, this goes back to the King Kong days, of trying to strike that right balance of mass and proportion and weight, but still carry through with the subtlety that the animation requires.
And of course, the thing about it is that they were trying to tackle a character in Smaug with obviously the high frame rate and everything else in this roller coaster ride, with everything else that was going on, from barrel rides to water sims to spiders to a couple of 100 billion pieces of gold. All of that was important. But the sheer brilliance and the presence of this digitally animated character on screen, its ability to convey emotion, that's what I think the Weta Digital team did really well with Smaug. Most monsters just need to scream and yell. Smaug needed to be inquisitive, arrogant, intelligent, and scary. And it had really heavy dialogue sequences, which came very, very close to a character design that really didn't lend itself very well to lip sync animation. Well, not without somehow drifting off into making the character look comical or silly, which they never did. That reptilian head never strayed away from providing an emotional performance. Rendered in RenderMan, it was exceptional work.
Well, that is right about on time.
The Lone Ranger is a fun Saturday morning adventure film with ILM's digital environments once again providing a great stage for some brilliant on-screen visual effects. Much of the environment in the pipeline at ILM there is V-Ray with 3ds Max workflow, which is kind of interesting. In fact, Dan Wheaton, who heads ILM's Digimat team, told us in an FX Guide article that it was because V-Ray crushed the renders, to quote him directly. The team also used SpeedTree to create a lot of digital trees and shrubbery and vegetation, all of which was fully 3D, not 2.5D using cards. Lone Ranger had some great miniature work. New Deal Studios did some great work, and it was also nice to see a 5th scale miniature, I think from 3210, who did that railway bridge sequence. Shot old school on VistaVision. But as cool as the old school stuff was, I think it's the digital train stuff that really took centre stage. Our favourite shot being one actually at the beginning of the film, where they reach the end of the tracks. For World War Z, Scott Farrar stepped in to work mainly with the UK effects companies MPC and CineSight to deliver a film that really beat all expectations. It was dramatic, scary, engaged with an audience, and also provided some of the largest crowd sims we actually saw. The zombie crowd sequences were primarily provided by MPC, which used its proprietary Alice toolset, as well as rigid body solver Pappy, which allowed for some really cool ragdoll sims. CineSight provided the truck crash and a load of other zombies running around the place. And we want to do a particular shout out to the onset and prop scanning teams of companies like 2H3D and 4D Max. These scanning teams basically have been popping up a lot this year. They provide really good, clean scans and huge data sets for a variety of projects. With their dedicated teams and their very good scanning stations, they provided hundreds of models and effects to the companies that were doing all of the zombies. And really, as a set of companies, seemed to come into their own right this year. We also want to do a shout out to the stereo conversion team at CineSight and Prime Focus. Our favourite shot was, of course, the attack on the wall.
And we had one live action shot of zombies hitting the wall and trying to climb up on top of one another. And we did clever camera tricks like lean the wall over, in actual fact, roll the camera over so actually the actors could climb up further than they normally do. Then on top of that, we put in a few CG zombies also climbing up on the real people. So it's a mix and match deal again to try and enhance this zombie behavior.
Image Engine really excelled this year with building on their earlier work in District 9 to deliver not only drones but incredible environment and space shots for director Neil Blomkamp in Elysium. VFX Soup Peter Misers led the team as they built a really gritty future on the ground and a floating nirvana in orbit.
The amount of data that we had to render and calculate was astronomical. And yes, you use all the tricks in the book, but the complexity of transparent glass, GI reflections, the ray tracing component was astronomical.
Image Engine were helped out by Weta Workshop, who did that great Hulk suit, Whiskey Tree, Method Studios, ILM, The Embassy, MPC, Kerner Optical, and Masters FX. Those grand shots of Elysium were really a high watermark for the Arnold renderer, just gorgeous shots in space. And of course, the Image Engine team did a great job with their use of practical stand-ins for everything from mocap actors standing in for robots, helicopters standing in for spaceships, and some really great 3210, Kerner Optical work for the practical crash of the Raven on Elysium, one of our favourite sequences. Iron Man 3 raised an already really high bar on flying suited superheroes. This film seemed to be a really great collaboration between a ton of facilities such as Digital Domain, Weta Digital, Framestore, Scanline, Trickster, Fuel VFX, Luma Pictures, and Method Studios. While the practical falling Air Force One sequence proved to be really successful and a lot of fun, for us it was the end destruction sequence with the multiple suits and the game of musical chairs that was really technically impressive. Weta delivered both a ton of different flying Iron Man suits and a really large complex environment, which along with Guy Pearce's face, they all blew up. Chris Townsend did a stellar job producing a really consistent and interesting VFX film. ILM's Roger Guy took Star Trek into the darkness with some really good help from Ben Grossman and the team at Pixarmondo, and Atomic Fiction headed up by Kevin Bailey. Star Trek is one of the most heavily mined pieces of cinema science fiction we have, and yet Roger and the team at ILM still managed to make a jump to warp speed seem fresh and visually interesting. We thought the opening red planet scene was brilliant, and the film delivered with a ton of great digital environments and space shots. Some of our favourites here in the office included the fight in San Francisco, the end of the film, and also earlier on, the fight or the attack on Starfleet headquarters. Roger had rigged up a navcam wire rig on set to replicate the movement of the actual, later to be added, CG space or gunship. That gunship, of course, had headlights on it, so the wire rig was projecting the correct light on the set and moving in a replicatable way. Ben's team at Pixamondo then picked up on that and completely matched it with CG elements that sort of completed the destruction of the headquarters. But it's this attention to detail and also the combination of on-set planning and really good sort of forward thinking that can elevate visual effects. And the best work this year exhibited exactly that.
Sometimes it was frightening hearing how many elements we had in each shot. You know, it would be like 100 pieces of smoke or, 60 elements of, embers or whatever. And when you're doing CG work, it's not so much that you can generate these elements, but they all have to work together.
Tom Cruise fighting and knocking the living daylights out of Tom Cruise on a post-apocalyptic Earth was provided by Eric Barber and the team at DD for Oblivion. DD delivered some really great work this year, and like several other films this year, the film did not just all fall back on fixing it in post. In fact, the film, for one of the key sets, the Sky Tower number 49 set, was actually built with a 500-foot wide and 42-foot tall screen projected by 21 digital projectors. This gave the team a 13K by 2K projected world that could envelop and surround the actors, providing realistic reflections complete with the shattered moon outside Earth. The film could run this individual setup for 20 minutes without a reset and dial in any particular time of day or night. And it's just one of the innovations in the film where a very digital savvy crew and a really experienced set of digital artists were pushing hard to do as much as they could in camera in new and technically interesting ways. Another example being their work they did with the incredible Bubble Ship. Digital Domain was supported in this film by Pixelmondo.
Hello?
Jake Morrison headed the visual effects up for Thor: The Dark World, one of this year's, I guess, most anticipated sequels. The film delivered on action, style, gags, and some incredibly impressive digital environments. The main VFX houses were DNEG, Blur Studios, which did nearly all, I think, of the prologue. Then there was Method Studios, Luma, and Third Floor, who once again delivered amazing previews. Certainly our favourite sequence was the attack on Asgard. The revisited or revised city, I think, was just much more believable. Certainly better textured, really well lit, and generally a lot more detail than we ever saw before, which was great because it needed to stand up to it in this attack sequence. And it needed to contrast really nicely, as it did, with those amazing Icelandic and Norwegian locations in the rest of the film.